The downed Malaysia jetliner. We look at whether an investigation will ever get to the truth. Also, how this plane crash could strain relations between Russia and the West even further. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Welcome to Globe Now. So lots of talk about an investigation into what brought down Malaysia Flight 17. It departed Amsterdam for Kuala Lumpur on Thursday, and over eastern Ukraine, something catastrophic happened. 298 people were aboard, all killed. The Globe's Washington correspondent Paul Coring has reported extensively on aviation disasters, and he joins us now from Washington. Welcome, Paul.
Morning.
How do you conduct an air crash investigation in the middle of a conflict zone?
Well, it makes it more difficult, but this conflict is fairly low-key, and this isn't going to be a very difficult investigation in terms of actually collecting bits and pieces. We know where the wreckage is, and in fact, we know what brought this aircraft down. It was a surface-to-air missile. So getting every last piece is probably less important in this instance than it is in many. They will be looking for missile debris, and of course, they'll want to collect the bodies.
But in terms of evidence, what evidence do we have now about what actually caused this airliner to go down?
I don't think there's much doubt. The American intelligence officials have confirmed there was a missile flash. We had the pro-Moscow separatist rebels claiming they'd shot down an airplane, although they said initially it was a Ukrainian military plane. What we don't know for absolute certain yet is who fired the missile, although the strong suspicions are to those rebels in eastern Ukraine. Equally importantly, we'll need to know how they got that surface-to-air missile launcher and whether or not they had any help with learning how to operate it and the training that goes into it. This is a sophisticated and powerful piece of military equipment.
And any light on that point? I mean, have we learned anything new about how these rebels might have gotten access, to that kind of a weapon system?
Well, they claimed back on June 26th that they'd stolen one or liberated one from a Ukrainian military base that they'd overrun. There's no evidence that it came from anywhere else. There's certainly no evidence at this stage that it was supplied from Russia. All these systems have been around since the 70s. They're all Russian-made, but all of the countries in Eastern Europe have many of them. So it's reasonable to assume that that's where they got it. They also published pictures over the last couple of days of them driving it around. And about a week ago, they did shoot down Ukrainian military transport. Initially, we thought that came down with a shoulder-held missile. But if, in fact, it was flying at 21,000 feet, as has now been reported, that would also suggest that this surface-to-air missile system may have been used at that height, too.
So it sounds like you don't have any doubts that we're going to get to the truth of what brought this jetliner down.
No, I think we'll get to the truth that it was a surface-to-air missile. Whether we'll get to all the fine details as to what, if any, technical support the people who actually pushed the button to fire the missile may have had from outside parties, I think that may be very difficult to get at, and I think that may create a lot of tension.
Is it virtually, impossible to gather that kind of evidence about, who pushed the button and when, from where, or is that something that intelligence agencies have capability of doing?
I think the intelligence agencies probably have more capability than they're telling you about. We've already seen or heard the transcript of a radio conversation purportedly between one of the local commanders and another separatist in the minutes after the firing, claiming to have shot down a plane. So that's already public knowledge. It's the stuff we don't know that may point to some of the details.
Okay, and last question. There have been a lot of questions about the flight path. Is it routine for passenger planes to fly over conflict zones?
Well, it is on the assumption that unless people have powerful, sophisticated surface-to-air missiles, they're not going to reach airliners at 30,000 feet. I mean, airliners fly over Afghanistan, airliners fly over Iraq, and did during the conflicts, or at least during the quieter phases of the conflicts. This has been an air route that's been open and used by plenty of airliners in the last little while. What will be interesting is that if the Ukrainian military knew that it had lost control of a surface-to-air missile launcher and lost control of it several weeks ago and left that airspace open, there's going to be lots of second guessing on that, too.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Well, we want to hear from you. Do you believe investigators will be able to get to the bottom of what brought down Malaysia Flight 17? Tweet us at Globe Now. So, a lot of blame being traded between Ukraine and Russia, each claiming the other is responsible for the downed Malaysia passenger plane. Relations between the two countries are bad to begin with, and then there's strained relations between Russia and Western countries like Canada, US, Britain. Well, to talk about the political implications of the crisis, we're joined by Professor Janice Stein of the Munk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. Welcome, Janice.
Pleasure to be here.
First question, if it is proven beyond doubt that rebels in eastern Ukraine using weapons that were supplied by Russia were behind this, what does that mean for Vladimir Putin's strategy in Ukraine?
It's a serious problem for him because Russians would have had to provide some training. These are sophisticated missiles. So the real question is, can he duck responsibility any longer if the evidence is forthcoming? The obstacle to doing anything on his part is he's already dissembling. Mm-hmm. He's already standing way back over the horizon and saying, this is not me, it's these rebels. I'm in favor of a ceasefire. What he will have to do is shut down the supply of weapons, equipment, and intelligence that we all know has been going across that border from Russia to these rebels in Ukraine.
Okay, let's imagine a scenario. You know, all kinds of evidence is gathered. It's presented to Vladimir Putin, and it claims to show irrefutable evidence that rebels, pro-Russia rebels in eastern Ukraine were behind this. What is his reaction, do you think?
I think my suspicion is, from what we know already, and let me go out on a limb, that that's exactly what is going to happen. We already have some preliminary evidence to suggest that that's the most likely scenario. He will continue to deny publicly that Russia has any responsibility for this. Mm-hmm. I don't think that will change. But I do think he is going to have to tighten his grip, and he's good at that. Tighten his grip on intelligence agencies inside Russia that are supporting these groups and on the groups themselves. They are by now in a smaller area. They are destabilizing his broader relationships around the world. He's going to have to clamp down.
What are President Barack Obama's options in that scenario?
Well, this makes it tougher for President Obama, and it's already very tough. The United States is leading on sanctions against Russia, along with Canada. But sanctions don't work unless all the major trading partners are participating in the sanctions. Who's out of the game? Mm-hmm. Well, the European Union, particularly Germany. They haven't put only notional sanctions on Russia. If Chancellor Merkel doesn't step up now, there's not very much more the United States can do. On the other side, of course, China, which has refused at all to participate in any of these sanctions regimes.
Interesting. Now, here's a question about justice. Malaysian Prime Minister talked about, if it is proven, that this plane was shot down, that the perpetrators should be brought to justice. Do you ever see that happening?
Well, let's assume in your scenario that the perpetrators are in fact a Russian-backed militia just over the border. That would require their arrest. Who's got the capacity to do that? The Ukrainian government doesn't. It is trying, in fact, to remove these militias from their territory. They haven't succeeded. It's inconceivable that Russia would arrest them. So if I were at The Hague right now in the International Court, I wouldn't be holding my breath.
Interesting. And bringing it back to Ukraine and the crisis in eastern Ukraine, I mean, do you have any sense of whether, this tragedy will at all speed up some sort of diplomatic solution?
Well, it's got to give, the territory in eastern Ukraine that declares itself independent is narrowing, and the rebels are under increasing siege from the Ukrainian military. They're angry with Russians that they have not done enough, believe it or not. This has to be a moment of truth if in fact they used Russian technology to shoot a civilian airliner out of the sky. That can be the beginning of the end for groups like this, because this is a risk too big for Russia to run in the future.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Professor Stein.
You're so welcome.
Well, that's all for today's show. We'll have ongoing coverage of this developing story on our website, globalmail.com, so do check it out. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Thanks for watching.